Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of The Longing. Today we're going to continue to read the Iliad, so let's crack on with that. The Iliad. The unwilling heralds act their lord's command. Pensive they walk along the barren sands. Arrived, the hero in his tent they find, with gloomy aspect on his arm reclined. At awful distance long they silent stand, loath to advance and speak their hard command. Decent confusion this the godlike man perceived. And thus with accent mild began. I read that slightly wrong, but oh well. With leave and honour enter our abodes, ye sacred ministers of men and gods. I know your message, by constraint you came. Not you, but your imperious lord I blame. Patroclus, haste the fair Briseis bring. Conduct my captive to the haughty king. Excuse me. But witness, heralds, and proclaim my vow. Witness to gods above and men below. But first and loudest to your prince declare, that lawless tyrant whose commands you bear. Unmoved as death Achilles shall remain, though prostrate Greece shall bleed at every vein. The raging chief in frantic passion lost, blind to himself and useless to his host. Unskilled to judge the future by the past, in blood and slaughter shall repent at last. The departure of Briseis from the tent of Achilles. Patroclus now the unwilling beauty brought, she in soft sorrows and in pensive thought, passed silent as the heralds held her hand, and looked back, slow moving o'er the strand. Not so his loss the fierce Achilles bore, but sad retiring to the sounding shore. O'er the wild margin of the deep he hung, that kindred deep from whence his mother sprung. There bathed in tears of anger and disdain, thus loud lamented to the stormy main. O parent goddess, since in early bloom thy son must fall by too severe a doom, sure to so short a race of glory born, great Jove in justice should this span adorn. Honour and fame at least the thunder owed, and ill he pays the promise of a god. If yon proud monarch thus thy son defies, obscures my glories, and resumes my prize, far from the deep recesses of the main, where aged ocean holds his watery reign. The goddess mother heard, the waves divide, and like a mist she rose above the tide. Beheld him mourning on the naked shores, and thus the sorrows of his soul explores. Why grieves my son? Thy anguish let me share. Reveal the cause and trust a parent's care. He deeply sighing said, to tell my woe is but to mention what too well you know. From Thebe sacred to Apollo's name, Aeacian's realm, our conquering army came. With treasure loaded and triumphant spoils, whose just division crowned the soldiers' toils. But bright Chryses' heavenly prize was led, by vote selected to the general's bed. The priest of Phoebus sought by gifts to gain his beauteous daughter from the victor's chain. The fleet he reached, and lowly bending down, held forth the sceptre and the laurel crown. Entreating all but chief implored for grace, the brother kings of Atreus' royal race. The generous Greeks their joint consent declare, the priest to reverence and release the fair. Not so Atrides, he, with wonted pride, this sire insulted and his gifts denied. The insulted sire his god's peculiar care to Phoebus prayed, and Phoebus heard the prayer. A dreadful plague ensues, and avenging darts incessant fly and pierce the Grecian hearts. A prophet then, inspired by heaven, arose, and points the crime, and thence derives the woes. myself the first the assembled chiefs incline, to avert the vengeance of the power divine. Then rising in his wrath the monarch stormed, incensed he threatened, and his threats performed. The fair Chryses to her sire was sent, with offered gifts to make the god relent. But now he seized Briseis' heavenly charms, and of my valour's prize defrauds my arms. Defrauds the votes of all the Grecian train, and service, faith, and justice plead in vain. But goddess, thou thy supplicant son attend, to high Olympus' shining court ascend. Urge all the ties to former service owed, and sue for vengeance to the thundering god. Oft hast thou triumphed in the glorious boast, that thou stoodst forth of all the ethereal host. When bold rebellion shook the realms above, the undaunted guard of cloud-compelling Jove, when the bright partner of his awful reign, the warlike maid and monarch of the main, the traitor gods by mad ambition driven, durst threat with chains the omnipotence of heaven. Then, called by thee, the monster Titan came, whose gods Briareus men Sagon name. I don't know how to say that name. Through wandering skies enormous stalked along, not he that shakes the solid earth so strong. With giant pride at Jove's high throne he stands, and brandished round him all his 100 hands. The affrighted gods confessed their awful lord, they dropped the fetters, trembled and adored. This goddess to his remembrance call, embrace his knees at his tribunal fall. Conjure him far to drive the Grecian train, to hurl them headlong to their fleet and main, to heap the shores with copious deaths and bring the Greeks to know the curse of such a king. Let Agamemnon lift his haughty head o'er all his wide dominion of the dead, and mourn in blood that ere he durst disgrace the boldest warrior of the Grecian race. Thetis calling Briareus to the assistance of Jupiter. Unhappy son, fair Thetis thus replies, while tears celestial trickle from her eyes. Why have I borne thee with a mother's throes, to fates averse and nursed for future woes? So short a space the light of heaven to view, so short a space and filled with sorrow too. O might a parent's careful wish prevail, far, far from Ilion should thy vessel sail, and thou from camps remote the danger shun, which now, alas, too nearly threats my son. Yet what I can to move thy suit I'll go, to great Olympus crowned with fleecy snow. Meantime secure within thy ships from far, behold the field not mingle in the war. The sire of gods and all the ethereal train, on the warm limits of the farthest main, now mix with mortals nor disdain to grace the feats of Cthopia's blameless race. 12 days the powers indulge the genial rite, returning with the 12th revolving light. Then will I mount the brazen dome, and move the high tribunal of immortal Jove. The goddess spoke, the rolling waves unclose, then down the steep she plunged from whence she rose, and left him sorrowing on the lonely coast, in wild resentment for the fair he lost. In Chrysa's port now sage Ulysses rode, beneath the deck the destined victims stowed. The sails they furled, they lashed the mast aside, and dropped their anchors, and the pinnacle tied. Next on the shore their hecatomb they land, Chryses last descending on the strand. Her thus returning from the furrowed main, Ulysses led to Phoebus' sacred fane, where at his solemn altar as the maid, he gave to Chryses, thus the hero said. And I think we're actually going to leave it there, because we are pretty much at the end of the time. My voice is starting to go, as some of you may have noticed. So, I'm not sure how much more there is to go, so we're just going to leave it there. So, Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night, no matter what time of day it is. I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.